This episode of SunnyRedemption Sailing is dedicated to my dear friend and co-host, Kevin. The best captain slash navigator a salty sloopin' sea dog could have. Ouch. SunnyRedemption Sailing would have been nothing without his knowledge, humor, and navigation that helped lay the groundwork for History Flights Productions, which now has 200 subscribers. Thank you to everyone who supports my journey for truth, justice, and historical accuracy. I hope he enjoys his gift copy of Avatar Frontiers of Pandora Complete Edition, and I can't wait to play that with him tonight. Hopefully. It depends on how long it actually takes him to get through the co-op. And celebrate our 50th episode soon. Where did the time even go? Hello and welcome to SunnyRedemption Sailing, your bi-weekly voyage for BSV gaming news. I got excited to review Avatar Fire and Ash. This is a spoiler review. For a spoiler-free review, check out a previous episode that I'll have linked in the description. I had to withstand some fiery discourse online that burned the wielder to ash, and I'll get to all of that throughout. For now, I, DC Shepard, am a white, zillennial, non-binary trans femme person with they, them, theirs pronouns, stepping into the female avatar known as Lahi, a member of the storytelling Sarentu clan on Pandora that was wiped out by sky people, what Na'vi call humans if you're unfamiliar with the Avatar universe, with its survivors forced to pretend they were human in RDA re-education camps. This resonates with me as an autistic person. I will start by telling the story of reneenicolegood without commenting on Earth politics, except what I can tie to the Avatar movies and games. For more specific depth on specific political topics, that's what you watch my History Flights podcast for, where I just talked about a recent policy decision by a recent administration of Sky People. Mrs. Good was shot in the face for, I guess, leaving the scene and not hurting anyone? Sky People are so strange and aggressive for no reason. No wonder why I felt like an alien my whole life due to autism. I would give anything to put my consciousness into an avatar if such existed. Though, I'll talk about the problems with that idea in a minute. This story comes from the Economic Times and is now committed to Eywa. Reneenicolegood, who I should note was married to a woman who could only watch and film as she was brutally murdered, was named by family members as the woman who was shot and killed by ICE agents in Minneapolis on Wednesday. Her mother, Donna Ganger, told the Star Tribune that Reneenicolegood was 37 years old and was, quote, one of the kindest people I've ever known. Quote, Donna Ganger said her daughter was known for caring for others throughout her life. She was extremely compassionate. She's taken care of people all her life. She was loving, forgiving, and affectionate. She was an amazing human being. Donna Ganger expressed anger and pain over her daughter's death. That's so stupid, Granger said of her daughter's death. She was probably terrified, her mother went on to say. After the shooting, alleged photos and social media profiles claiming to belong to Reneenicolegood began circulating online. Several users on X shared what they said was Good's social media account. The Instagram bio on the shared account read, poet and writer and wife and mom and shitty guitar strummer from Colorado. Experiencing Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm going to try to avoid violence and politics that are specific as much as I can, though. Whoop. Okay, then. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said his administration will fully pursue justice in the case. Walz said his government, quote, is going to stop at nothing to seek accountability and justice. The governor said the State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension is leading the investigation. The State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension are working on the investigation, Walz said. Walz said the state's Emergency Operations Center has been activated. He said National Guard leadership is coordinating with state and local police and homeland security agencies. Again, I won't delve too deeply into the reaction to her death, but suffice it to say that it varies along political lines among the once mightiest nation of sky people. This bodes ill for the great Mother of Earth. As Carl Sagan, a genius scientist and storyteller, said in his speech, Who Speaks for Earth? The balance of terror is a delicate balance, with very little margin for miscalculation. He said a new consciousness is developing which sees the Earth as a single organism, and recognizes that an organism at war with itself is doomed. We are one planet. I don't think many realize that. And even those that do claim to, such as the Baha'i Faith, can be arrogant about it. I've talked about that on my other podcast, The Hidden Faith, a truly independent investigation of the Baha'i Faith, though. So check that out if you want to learn more. The theme of Fire and Ash is that the sworn enemies of the Meccaina clan, the nomadic raiders known as the Mangwan clan or Ash people, teach us that the Na'vi clans, even while defending their sacred lands, can lose their way if they feel abandoned by Eywa and give in to anger. So I like how this game rewards you for clean kills through the heart, as well as not using bullets to just kill the creatures. It makes sense. You wouldn't want a bunch of lead in your dinner. Feeling abandoned by Eywa can lead you to give in to anger like Varang did, as well as hatred. And like Neytiri almost did, but I'll get to her later. I think that's understandable after Varang's forest was obliterated by a volcano. Eywa did nothing to save the Mangwan, and she was forced to wield fire and scavenge meat in an inhospitable desert for her people. Which I inferred from the scene where bones are dangling in her tent and Quaritch says it's cozy before doing drugs with her. I consider her one of my favorite blockbuster movie villains of all time, since Thanos at least. And the key ingredient in making Fire and Ash the best Avatar movie in my opinion. The overall... Oh! Ow. Gotta do this again, I suppose. Great Mother, forgive me. This is unavoidable. It's me or them. Yeah, I think a clean kill is actually like their underside, but it's difficult to aim in third person, that's for sure. The overall storytelling of the movie is up for debate, but I hope you'll understand what I mean as time goes on. Great Mother, please hear my small voice. Fire and Ash explains that Eywa is a mycelium with sentience and the ability to heal, rapidly alter biology, like The Last of Us minus the undeath. Eywa also allows every life form to connect to it via Kuru, and Spider to breathe Pandora's air, and grants religious visions. These visions could be from a literal deity, or, based on the fact that these are living fungi, that's what a mycelium is, sci-fi shrooms trips. Shrooms didn't make us human, but they could have helped with social bonding. Plus, as I'll talk about with cannabis and religion researcher Chris Bennett on the next episode of The Hidden Faith, drugs have a very extensive history of being intertwined with religion. Oh boy. Ah! Probably need to wait until it rains to gather these plants. Oh boy. Guess I'm going for a ride down the waterfall. Woo! Oh boy. Oh boy. Ah! Okay. Huh. Yeah, I guess there was no swimming past that. Ooh, that is a lot of water coming down on my head, though. Hang on. Alright, well, a Sarentu never gives up. I'm sure I'll find another way up there. In any case, all history can do is teach us. It cannot act on our behalf. We must learn from history, and then decide how to act upon it ourselves, while taking great care in how we act. That's why so many nations want to censor history, and online influencers want to simplify and distort it. Because real history defies those things. True understanding of history starts by you knowing that history comes from the Greek historia, meaning inquiry or knowledge gained by investigation, which we should all do before pronouncing any opinions. Therefore, Eywa is all of those things, with most of the characters repeatedly asked to see each other and starting to, including Quaritch. And I hope you know that I see you, and see your confusion and exhaustion with what's going on as we, the Sky People, slowly kill our Great Mother amid pointless fighting, instead of finding common sense solutions to heal the only planet we have. James Cameron, in his highly sexualized, but also fairly nuanced exploration of Varang, leader of the Ash People, shows us a clan whose control of fire has become an obsession with vengeance. For how little time she's actually in this movie, anyway, which is a complaint of mine, but only because I wanted more of a thing I liked, which is a good problem for a movie to have. Varang decides to take her pain out on everyone else, even her lover Quaritch in the scene where she slices his chest with a knife, while he's doing Khrushchev's ass drugs that gives hallucinations. The way he said ow made me laugh out loud. The only thing is that Varang ignores the real instigators of all this violence on Pandora. The Resource Development Administration, or RDA. That is my mission as a Sarentu here today. To explain how to overcome evil without copying it, and why we should use violence only as a last resort, when all other options for peace have been exhausted. Like the Tulkun matriarchs cautioned in the movie until violence done to them was undeniable. I don't blame the Tulkun for being a little slow to adapt to a world suddenly out of whack. Keeping strong community bonds is what fungal mycelia do best. So as I mentioned, with every creature stated as endosymbiotic, meaning that their internal systems are symbiotic with this fungus. After a connection to Eywa shortly after birth in the ritual that is central to the Tulkun's plot arc, as well as Spider's adaptation to his real home of Pandora, it's no wonder Na'vi have more of a communal outlook that, per insightful Reddit post from Weed, makes them see humans as insane. Of course, there's still violence, but I can imagine it would be greatly reduced in necessity if you could literally feel every thought of another human, or the deer you're about to hunt. All that is rather unlike how Sky People in the world of Avatar got obsessed with destroying Home Tree for unobtainium, still a dumb name, or slaughtering Tulkun for Amrita. Better, but could have used the second pass. And didn't care about the consequences. Why even hire that poor marine biologist, then, if you're just going to ignore him until he reverse turn gullies the base at the end in a massive dump truck? That seems like a huge liability, but the RDA have never had the greatest tactical sense. I thought his small arc was great, and the line, "Is my protest noted now, fuckers?" was amazing. You would think that they'd order some fighter jets and jet engine bombers by now, instead of slow quadcopters with rotors highly vulnerable to arrows. But they can't, because even modern-day fighter jets would raffle-stomp space dragons, let alone in the 22nd century. That would be too easy, and then there'd be no movie. I also got some lore-related explanations about, like, drag on the atmosphere of Pandora and stuff like that. Just like how James Cameron waves away the "just nuke him from orbit" criticism by having the Interplanetary Commerce Administration grant the Resource Development Administration, a private company people seem to forget, the monopoly on Pandoran resource extraction in exchange for a ban on WMD use. Like a lot of Cameronian plot points, they can seem strange out of context, but make perfect sense in the context of his singular world building. In response to the original version of my comment on Reddit, BetterMode1046 made an excellent point. You have to consider that RDA is not at war with Na'vi. They just run a mining and whaling operations that the Na'vi sometimes slightly disrupt. Finale of FAA was the most that Na'vi ever won since Bridgehead was established, and it demanded Toruk Makto rallying the clans, hundreds of whales, and Kiri triggering every animal in the area to attack to barely snatch a Sikh victory. And that was not a fight against military force, only some fishing crew. To which I responded, "It's funny you mentioned Pyrrhic victories, as a lot of the reason colonial forces won in our world was because they established small outposts at first, made themselves useful to the natives while exploring and exploiting divisions amongst them, such as wars between Native American tribes, or purchasing prisoners of war in African wars for the Atlantic slave trade, and only then used overwhelming force. Though native forces scored plenty of tactical victories along the way, and only lost in the end due to the fact Europeans just kept sending ships and they had no ability to respond." Brief aside, these are named after King Pyrrhus of Epirus, who invaded Rome in the Pyrrhic War of 280 to 275 BCE, and won most battles, but then had to withdraw his exhausted forces. Back to my reply. The RDA lost so many times due to basic tactical blunders such as not doing proper reconnaissance. My man Quaritch single-handedly negotiated an alliance the RDA should have thought of for classic divide and conquer. They also ignored scientific expertise that would have allowed them to avoid costly mistakes, and didn't gain trust with the natives before smashing the environment that they considered sacred, and that may have had non-invasive ways of being harvested or grown from seeds in captivity on Earth to try to rebuild that environment. The only reason that the RDA will probably win the war is because they appear to have unlimited government backing to keep sending ships, and the Na'vi have no answer for that. I think the play for the Na'vi is to steal a sleeper ship to Earth. I heard rumors about this too for Avatar 5. To alert the governments and people of that world about the RDA's war crimes and offer a more equitable arrangement such as, I don't know, replicating Amrita from only the occasional dying Tulkun Bull so they don't once lure away their moneymaker. Speaking of which, Sky people in our world eventually recognized the dangers of overhunting whales and banned the practice in 1986. Yet, whales are having trouble finding food and singing less due to climate change because they have to travel farther to do so. And Japan is illegally whaling by withdrawing to their exclusive economic zone. So maybe we are stupid about that and would overhunt everything if given the chance. The grounded inspirations for the science fiction takes on real-world biology are some of my favorite parts of Avatar's world building. My favorite things in Fire and Ash were the balloonfish that carried the Wind Trader's awe-inspiring airships. Since I coincidentally have balloon turtles called Ruwano, from the Malaysian for that, though my language notes are terrible, and I'm hoping to get some help with my conlines from the Discord for that as well. This is all part of the Kingdom of Baharia, which uses them and other fish leathers for fashion in the steampunk fantasy universe I'm writing called The World of Taragia. Baharians also have a symbiotic connection to plants called grip kelp that they use to build all of their housing, that drinks from their sweat and filters that to help feed the plant, but also can allow you to drink the excess, as well as eat part of the plant to survive, and then allows them to have extra limbs, basically, through a symbiotic thing. So, great minds think alike, I hope, is what you'll take away from this, when The Wind Empress in Their Majesty's Service comes out sometime this year. Though, between the 3 podcasts that I have trying to find a new job, and all of the stress, it's been hard to find time to write for the book. I have to say, overall, though, that I would have liked this movie to feel a little less like a retread of Way of Water, since I would have thought a movie called Fire and Ash would have more fire and ash. The only reason why I didn't do the From the Ashes expansion for this, even though it would have been thematically appropriate, is because it's very story-heavy, and the characters would have talked over my commentary. I mean, I understand to a degree, because they had to wrap up a lot of plot threads, and James does love himself some water. Love it or hate it, the man has vision and sticks to it. I would eat up a completely plot-free nature documentary set in Pandora's oceans, like the documentaries he's made before, and I still need to see The Abyss on DVD. I was going to get it on 4K Ultra HD after that was announced, but then I learned that they use terrible AI upscaling, so he's not entirely off the hook from me, but it's not the biggest deal in the world since the DVD is right there, and should upscale fairly okay. This paper from the NIH also states it best when it comes to the mycelium known as Eywa. The characteristic growth pattern of fungal mycelia as an interconnected network has a major impact on how cellular events operating on a micron scale affect colony behavior at an ecological scale. Network structure is intimately linked to flows of resources across the network that in turn modify the network architecture itself. This complex interplay shapes the incredibly plastic behavior of fungi and allows them to cope with patchy, ephemeral resources. Since they eat decaying matter, that's mainly what they mean, is if there's less decaying matter in the area. as well as competition, damage, and predation in a manner completely different from multicellular plants or animals. So basically, mushrooms like these that look completely different on the surface. Oh no, wait, these aren't mushrooms, but you get the idea. They look like them. Only it's an entire planet like this. Individual organisms on the surface are simply surface expressions of the same whole. This reinforces the theme expounded on in the movie that everyone who is connected to Eywa is not really gone. As long as the mycelia lives, some part of that mushroom goes on when it's absorbed back into the mycelium. I think the afterlife shown in the movie is just memories being incorporated into the network and transmitted back to living beings by the mycelium. Speaking of interconnection, as I've mentioned many times, I believe that love, God, all those abstract concepts are rooted in pro-social evolutionary imperatives. This can be damaging, though, to anyone who doesn't conform, such as the bullying Kiri experienced in Way of Water, or Payakan's exile in this movie, or the marriage vow I was pressured to make to conform to the authoritarian Baha'i cult. I didn't believe in when love to me does not have a will, let alone a God. All I know is I'm trying to do the best with the life that I know I have. That's it. It should not be that hard for people to accept that and just move on with their lives. But, well, us sky people and our petty fights, right? I know that's why I related to Kiri. And she's the other emotional center of Fire and Ash for me. I think that's because I've constantly had to mask my autistic behaviors from my natural neurodivergence that has only been socially disabled because society demands a certain performance of social and physical mimicry to deem you functional in conversations or life. I've always felt like a bit of an outsider, even a black sheep in my own family at times, because even though they love me, there's always going to be the double empathy problem. This is because neuroscience is increasingly realizing that neurotypical people don't have the norm for how social interactions should go, but merely one different way of viewing them that isn't right or wrong, just different, just like that of neurodivergent people. Which means they both need to work hard to understand each other. I've always gravitated to robot characters such as R2-D2 from Star Wars, Baymax from Big Hero 6, especially Roz from The Wild Robot lately due to how relatable it is to me as a new parent, and other non-human characters such as dinosaurs, dragons, and talking cars, because my dehumanization as an autistic person constantly frustrated me for being unable to understand what I was, quote, supposed to understand and do, and having to work at every social interaction until I felt exhausted, angry at myself, and lonely. Thankfully, that self-loathing has started to slowly erode, thanks to my beautiful baby bird in Eswatini and her adorable 9-year-old son who calls me daddy already. I'll tell him about being transgender later, because their unconditional love of me is like nothing I've ever known. I mean, of course, again, I have my family and they unconditionally love me, but it's a different kind of unconditional love, obviously. Not better or worse, just different. And it's nice to have that different love, too. The Greeks had 8 different types of love for a reason. Before I begin to delve more into Kiri, though, the digital real 3D at my local alamodrafthouse was fine, but I wish they decided to upgrade the big show to 3D, because that giant laser 4K projection with the Dolby Atmos would have been amazing. Though, as I'll keep saying, I can also understand why they did not. Plus, I was enjoying indulging in loaded chili fries, orange gochujang, and BBQ Reaper's wings. Uh-oh. Ow! Leave me alone! Okay. No, not cool. How was that not a clean kill?
Thank you for these gifts.
Oh, whoops. Oh, I see. It has to be when it rears up, I think. Okay. Come on, buddy. Don't. Or right, the armor. Fatality.
Thank you for these gifts.
Of attacking me and then stupidly dying. At least the other one has sense. I also had an old-fashioned truffle popcorn and carnivore pizza with jalapenos. It was a bit indulgent, and when I tell you I was stuffed and that this was best food I've ever had at a movie theater, well, let's just say the bill reflected that. Anyway, I just remembered that the second viewing of The Way of Water at an IMAX 3D theater made me feel like a middle schooler seeing science field trips again. So that's what I think I'll do, potentially with friends at some point. I'm such a tiny YouTuber, I don't know how I managed it, but I believe in the power of learning from multiple cultural perspectives to synthesize a greater, more nuanced understanding of historical, current, and fictional politics across my whole channel, as well as video games with this show, SunnyRedemption Sailing. And so does the passionate developer of this app. However, not everyone has a smooth-voiced co-host like Kevin, who's a walking encyclopedia of video game and other trivia, having literally won hundreds of dollars in Microsoft gift cards, and I can't wait to deep dive on the movie and the game Avatar Frontiers of Pandora with him later in the video, or a background in political science to balance out their analysis. If you need more help making sense of the news than even I can provide, like how I need help flying to the floating mountains with Floof, then Droid Social for iOS and Android has you covered by comparing political perspectives of various articles and allowing you to summarize and have articles read to you by AI. Though I will not be doing that myself. If you'd like to stay more informed and cut through disinformation for just $2 a month, be sure to use my code HISTORYFLIGHTS for 50% off a year of Droid Premium. That's $25 for the ability to stay well informed. Anyway, I made a post about Kiri in the Avatar subreddit about 2 years ago after my third viewing of TWOW with my dad on HBO Max. It's funny how Avatar movies always stream on both Disney Plus and HBO Max, due to Disney having to honor 20th Century Fox's prior movie deal with HBO. Entitled, "What Are You, a Freak? How I Related to Kiri?" I just finished watching this excellent movie for the third time, and this is my first viewing with my dad. My favorite part of this movie was the undying bromance between Loak and Payakan. Future Shepard here. Unfortunately, that got short shrift this time. A close second is how Kiri is characterized. Though she and all the women in this movie could have had a little bit more agency, I feel like that was greatly improved for Fire and Ash. For one simple reason, she is almost certainly neurodivergent coded. Ah! Will you leave me alone, dude? Come to take vengeance for your friends, have you? Ow. I think that hurt both of us there, bud. I forget how I'm supposed to slow time. It's probably hold right stick, but I'll have to check next time. Viper Wolf. There we are. Whether her neurodivergent coding is a result of some scientific miracle or divine intervention is unclear, nor is it important. It is plausible as well that this works similarly to how neurodivergent people possibly filled the niche of shaman on Earth. That the overwhelming sensation when she connects to Eywa could feel like it comes from a goddess. I'm slightly paraphrasing my post here for clarity. Scenes such as her lingering in the water on the first dive, looking at the sand and being called a freak, being super focused on controlling those underwater creatures with arm motions that look similar to stimming, those felt painfully accurate to my history navigating a world not made for autistic people like me. Oh right, I have a freaking Ekron. I forgot. But first, the scene where she confided in her dad and Jake affirmed her perspective on Eywa, even if Jake didn't understand it, reminded me of my own father supporting me by growing out his hair after I came out non-binary. And the seizures that Kiri experienced at the underwater tree could be explained by her brain being overconnected. All in all, if I could be reincarnated anywhere, or transfer my consciousness into an avatar, it would be a female Na'vi who's like Kiri. This movie was an amazing start to 2026, despite all its problems, because I was in tears when Kiri declared, why am I like this in one of her Eywa visions? It reminded me of my fight with God in the parking lot of American University, while sick with mononucleosis, tired from fueling myself with 20-piece chicken McNuggets and Coca-Cola, passively suicidal, and giving up on religion like Varang did. Then it was so nice to see Kiri work with Spider and Took to reach Eywa at last. Though I admit I'm a bit troubled by the underage love between Kiri and Spider, considering that Kiri is voiced by a 76-year-old woman. After being nervous it might be too raspy, I didn't mind how her voice sounded. I've always felt like my voice was off to people. To the point one troll online called my nasally voice the autism accent, which is ableist. I never had whole body dysphoria either, but along with chest dysphoria, I was upset I didn't sound as, quote, manly as others, yet couldn't put my finger on why I liked being called ma'am or told I had a beautiful voice on the phone, until I came out non-binary in 2022. I then got attacked 3 times for it, once nearly every year since. The latest and worst incident involved 2 young black men on the DC Metro in 2024.
You decided to harass me for no apparent reason, and now you're doing it in public. Don't get on the train. These people are harassing me. These people are harassing me. Fuck off. Bitch ass niggas. Fuck you.
I only started speaking confidently about it 2 years ago on History Flights Productions after the death of Next Benedict as well. Leave my brothers and sisters and nibblings alone, or you'll hear from me. Fire upon the unjust. Words that excoriate anyone who does wrong, whatever their origin, with righteous truth. Possibly influenced by my Catholic background. Is it that men are expected to sound deeper voiced and girls are supposed to sound high-pitched? According to some. For some reason, people downvoted me en masse for even asking whether the response for Sigourney's voice could have sexist undertones without assuming anything. The downvote button is not supposed to be a disagree button. Apropos of nothing, I think both Sigourney Weaver gave another fantastic performance in all areas, and that I did a good thing by promoting an alternate fan dub from an actual teenage girl named Leona on YouTube, who took great pains to explain that she wasn't hating on Sigourney's performance, and in fact loved the fact that it made her more whimsical. Most of the acting otherwise was the same brand of either wooden or melodramatic that we've come to expect from James Cameron, even with Varang, who again is an awesome character. She chews scenery like there's no tomorrow when she's on screen. Which I need to mention once more, I completely understand and kind of missed about villains even if I wouldn't have written it that way. Then again, James Cameron is not an auteur at realistic dialogue or behavior, but only James Cameron can make James Cameron movies that are always ambitious if not always as thematically deep as you might like. That makes Quaritch all the more believable for his ruthlessness and yet tender side, and even his rigidity as a Marine that makes him hate Jake Sully for betraying him, and every human who died allows him to joke with Jake when he can't kill him. This serves to somewhat humanize the poor jarheads sent to die for the RDA's greed. Yet in the massive genocide of the Na'vi, just following orders has never been a defense to war crimes. Therefore, I expect the ICA to revoke the RDA's operating license if they find out about half the shit they did, and try all the top RDA leadership for crimes against the sapient species. Or maybe that's just the passionate civil service member in me talking. I will say that, unfortunately, there is a reason Sam Worthington hasn't really broken out from Avatar. He really is the linchpin of all the problems people have with the narrative of the James Cameron Avatar movies, which Alamodrafthouse previews compared with a bunch of other movies. These range from how generic he is as a chosen one, to the fact that he's white inhabiting a colonized person's body. But once you get to ripping apart the movie series framing that much, then you probably don't buy into the Avatar series to begin with. And I promise the second and third movies are much more than the first's dancing with wolves in space. To the still lacking chemistry with Neytiri, who really is just staying for the kids at this point. I'm also sure she still thinks about them differently for having 5 fingers, because everyone has unconscious bias, even marginalized folk. At least neytiri went through a very believable arc from blaming poor Spider for everything to saving his life from Jake's reluctant utilitarianism. And realizing that unlike Varang, she shouldn't let hatred control her life. Eywa in Varang's case, and humans for neytiri, as Jake has a very good point about him still being human inside because his human experiences don't go away. This may resonate for people with mixed race ancestry. I know I make a great number of cultural faux pas sometimes with my baby bird because there are bound to be miscommunications when we live on two continents with far different cultures. But the key is that neither of us ever believes the other is trying to hurt them on purpose. What are you? Oh, okay, phew. You scared me there, Floof. You gotta be a little bit better at letting me know where you are, Mr. Floof. Getting even the chance to understand such a remarkable woman who sees right through me has been the great honor of my life. Well, Ngati Kame. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. That's why I'm taking Navi classes. I see you, and I love you mostest with all the stars in the universe. You give me the power to thunder against tyranny and hatred in all its forms. The assurance that I have someone as brilliant and kind as funny as my sister's husband is for her. Their wedding was one of the brightest spots of 2025, alongside getting to see you both in May in Durban, South Africa, and
Look at the monkeys! I am currently taking a video of the monkeys.
in October in Mbabane, Eswatini.
Hey, Mr. Buddy. I promise. Yeah, there we are. And I promise you. Yeah. And I promise you, someday I'm gonna take you and bring you to here. Okay? That's a promise from me. I love you.
You are my equal in every conversation, though in a much healthier way than Varang and Quaritch, and able to counterbalance my anxieties. I am so proud of you, everything you do, and in awe of your resilience. You also give me hope that I can give you and our son a better life in the United States once we can hopefully get married in 2030. We are part of a rich tradition of long-distance love going back to the telegraph, and I want to wake up next to you for the rest of our lives. Just like when I saw the Indian Ocean with the woman who makes my heart rise too. Back to Zoe Saldana for a minute. She did the best she could with the dialogue given to her. Yet I don't know how neytiri didn't drown from blood in her lungs after that arrowhead to the back. But it was possibly due to the power of adrenaline that gives moms what's known, for lack of a better term, due to the history of the misuse of the term hysteria against women as hysterical strength when, say, lifting cars off their children. This would make sense as neytiri shrugs off her mother's pleas to rest to join the search for her children while bandaged. Or perhaps she just had plot armor, which does make the fight scenes feel less intense than they could have been, especially since I called that the two-dimensional Metcayena chieftain's wife was going to die in childbirth from a mile away after serving her one narrative purpose, which is adding one more to the already large Sully clan for Avatar 4 and 5. If they get made as planned in 2029 and 2031 before James Cameron dies at this rate. Though, he at least has a backup news conference planned if he doesn't have the ability to make these movies for some reason. So we won't be left hanging. Perhaps a death early on, such as in the Wind Trader battle, which was still awesomely edited, shot, paced, etc., don't get me wrong. Oh, wow. What an amazing shot this is. With that rising music. Yeah, this could just be peaceful meditation simulator game for me. Or perhaps a death later on, such as Payakan, since he didn't really do all that much until much later in the movie, and could have been the perfect sacrifice during the final battle due to our attachment to him in Loak. But for 4, I expect a major character death to help ground the stakes as things are getting dire for our heroes. On the whole, though, the movie did a good job of exploring how hatred can drive a person to do terrible things in the name of utilitarian good, which according to maximizing morality, the utilitarian ethic, utilitarianism, quote, seems willing in principle to sacrifice the interests and perhaps even lives of individuals for the sake of the benefits of a larger group. And this seems to conflict with our basic moral intuition that people have a right not to be used in this way. Which leads me, unfortunately, as I sit down on my high rock, to a man consumed by blind, self-righteous, intransigent hatred of pretty much everyone who has ever opposed him. Nia Wahid Azal, the cult leader of the Fatimiyya Sufi order. This whole sordid story is in a video I'll link, and I'll finally unpack all my feelings without letting anger get the best of me. Because that's how trolls like him win. When I record a new episode of the Hidden Faith podcast for upload on Sunday, January 11th, with Chris Bennett and Dale Husband, the honorable skeptic who I met through the ex-Baha'i subreddit, and who has been a frequent victim of Wahid's. I promise, this will all tie back to Avatar. Throughout my interactions with Wahid, I have presented evidence, often via links or references to social media logs that were displayed on screen in the video, that Azal engages in a pattern of, quote, counter-colonial harassment simply for disagreeing with his geopolitical takes. My issue is Azal uses the language of decolonization to justify predatory behavior, including doxing and the use of aggressive, gendered insults, as well as attempts to paint me as incapable of addressing the violence of the system simply because I'm a white American who doesn't want to immediately overthrow every government who has ever done anything wrong. Azal's anti-imperialism is performative because his unilateral, aggressive, and silencing conduct mirrors the very logic he claims to oppose. It's amazing that it's getting stormier as I'm talking about this out here. But thankfully the storm in my own heart has settled down. Because he can't hurt me. He is a pathetic, weak old man who cannot truly hurt me. And if he tries, he will not like the results. That's all I'm going to say. But I will never stoop so low as to reveal his personal information that he hasn't already put out there. His name is out there. That is his name. He renamed it when he was a teenager, I think. Wow, that is some god rays over there. And speaking of which, because he claims to be a manifestation of God, yeah, right. In his latest response, how DC Shepard, once again misspelled, trips over his own dick, he cannot help but try to have the last word in every conversation. Wahid Azal does not provide a structured refutation of my policy analysis, which I will not even get into here because that's not relevant. Instead, he focuses almost exclusively on attacking my character and settler status. Now, sure, my family definitely benefited from spaces that were cleared of Native Americans. My family did not participate in slavery or massacres of natives or anything like that. My dad's side was just farming, and my mom's side were none of your business. Besides, labeling every American personally culpable for past American actions is the kind of facile, internet-brained take that people make fun of for a reason, as a rainbow peeks through. How thematic. I know people with relatives on the Mayflower. Does that mean they carry the sins of the Pilgrims? Should my Irish family have just stayed put in Ireland and died from the potato famine because that was their native land? Should I have just left the love of my life and her son in abject poverty because you prejudge any American trying to help a foreigner? That isn't to minimize the struggles and sacrifices of Native Americans or other previously colonized peoples, or still colonized peoples. Nor do I shirk my responsibility as a white person to try to do better, or the challenges of an intercultural relationship. I hope I am doing the best I can by giving my African family as good of a life as I possibly can, considering the everything in the world right now, and being the, quote, father Mr. Man never had until I can explain the gender thing when he's older, while teaching him as much history as I can once he gets to the States, such as by taking him to Smithsonian museums, the National Zoo, the Spy Museum, and more. In particular, I have a whole new appreciation for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, because I'm afraid of how he'll be treated for having darker skin color, and want my brilliant boy to know the remarkable things that Black Americans have accomplished despite it all.
That is a lot of gold. That's for sure. This is so amazing to me to see, because I believe in the ability of my wonderful, sweet, handsome black boy. I love him so much and I can't wait for him to be here. And I'm so scared too. He is still flying. He will always be.
But by exposing my legal name, which is a crime that Wahid still has not responded to the evidence for, and constantly delegitimizing my identity in an aggressive manner, his dick, as if genitalia determines gender, being the definitive answer that he's ignoring my pronouns on purpose, and not just ignorant of them like he is of spelling of my pen name. So he's a transphobe. He also made a trans friend up out of whole cloth, who, even if real, idiotically argued that non-binary people are just centrists who are, quote, rebranding manhood in an attempt to create a genderless world, and, quote, equivocate on sexual justice like they do on politics. Spelled with a K for some reason. Oh, look at those low-lying clouds. This place is so beautiful. This demonstrates a long history of NB phobia by binary trans people. Again, no one is free of unconscious bias. By mocking my identity, Wahid Azal and their fake trans friend dismissed the accusations of his own behavior out of hand the way he claims I do his arguments. The problem for Wahid Azal is that his own arguments are dismissed by himself acting in this manner and never taking accountability for it. I'll make it plain. My identity as a settler or a person are not on trial, Wahid. I demand that you address the documentary evidence of pathological harassment and retract your false defamation blocks on my videos in Australia and take down my name you used in an illegal manner by abusing a legal process, the YouTube copyright claim that I retracted and apologized for, to cause emotional distress and to try hacking my Instagram. Or prepare for deplatforming if you do not remove my legal name from your Substack, like you've emptily threatened your opponents with. In sum, my evidence includes unprovoked, high-strung messaging designed to intimidate Baha'is into submission, urination on their holiest book, and threats to send their personal information to authorities in Iran, where they could be executed. The use of sexualized, gendered vitriol targeting masculinity and physical appearance, e.g. the title of Wahid Azal's rebuttal, as well as parental status, which is a tactic to bypass intellectual debate. Attempts to link the Shepard's online persona to real-world identifiers to exert social pressure and silence journalistic reporting. Responding to factual corrections on Venezuelan history with personal attacks rather than counter-evidence. Azal frames his behavior as, quote, cleansing violence, despite refusing in his failed rebuttal to quote directly from the man he takes philosophical inspiration from, Frantz Fanon. Perhaps if Wahid had directly cited the Martinican revolutionaries' works, he might have followed the intellectual provenance of his arguments in order to critique the evidence he presents and learn from his excellent understanding of high theory. Since he was more interested in saying, though, that I can never possibly understand, that I'm already too much of a colonizer, no matter how much I object to colonialism, to do anything to meaningfully affect change within the system, and that no Western actions are acceptable, a priori, whether UN authorized or unilateral, delegitimizing international law rather than admitting flaws in one's argument is a choice. His fury was ineffective because he once again scattered the frame. However, in The Wretched of the Earth, Fanon defines violence as a process that restores the humanity of the colonized. In contrast, Azal's tactics are designed to strip humanity away, making them a mirror of the colonizer's tactics. Fanon also warns in Chapter 3 of the same book that when a leader lacks a program, they turn to, quote, the worship of the leader and the, quote, crushing of the individual. Azal's focus on my, quote, dick instead of my data is a textbook example of this intellectual decay. A liberation movement without a clear humanistic program becomes a 1984-style dictatorship of the party, or a cult of personality, as the Fatimiyya Sufi order has become, by its leader not adhering to its own 19 commandments. This chapter also exposes the transition from revolutionary struggle to gang leader behavior. If the intellectual stops educating and starts bullying, they have fallen into the pitfall of tribalism. Fanon also argues that national consciousness must be, quote, decentered, so it doesn't just become a tool for a new set of masters to abuse their peers. Back to Chapter 1 for a minute. Violence is a, quote, cleansing force only when it breaks the internal psychological chains of the colonized. Fanon is not giving a license for doxing or sexualized insults. Fanon describes violence as a tragic sociological phenomenon, not a social media strategy with which to accrue followers and likes. To use cleansing violence to silence me is to use the colonizer's tools to preserve a personal ego, not gain a people's freedom. Azal uses the settler label as a totalizing weapon. Fanon, however, warns against becoming fixed in these categories. By refusing to engage with my evidence or my understanding of privilege and discrimination in varying degrees, because of my ability, but also requirement to mask my autism and femininity, and focusing on a vague straw man of settler identity, Azal is again reinforcing colonial categories he claims to dismantle. The behavior of Varang and her ash people, hyper-aggression, and lack of empathy is also categorized by Fanon in Chapter 5 of The Wretched of the Earth as a mental symptom of the colonial environment. Azal's insults are therefore not radicalism, but a pathological reaction to his own inability to logically defend his conduct and refusal to ever see me through our shared understanding of history. Through Eywa's eyes, in other words. By providing the receipts of harassment and policy analysis, I am acting in the Sarentu tradition of documenting history and explaining it as best I can in an accessible manner. By responding with vulgarity and failing to cite his own sources, Wahid Azal has chosen the same path of mindless violence for its own sake as Varang and the Ash people, in the hope of changing the system after benefiting from the free speech protections and educational opportunities afforded to him through violence, without considering the consequences of his actions, or whether anyone in said system he despises might not be so evil, or wholly culpable for all evils of a system as he claims, or really anything but the immediate soothing of his ego. Overall, this reveals a disturbing trend in postmodern critical discourse, the abuse of postcolonial rhetoric to shield against predatory unilateral behavior. This was exemplified by Ibram X. Kendi. Per the Daily Beast article, Ibram X. Kendi's refusal to debate critics was an act of surrender. For all his brilliance in exposing systemic racism, as you can guess, Kendi refused to ever debate his critics, even black ones. Instead, he relied on the understandable post-BLM social taboo of ever criticizing black intellectuals to shield his actions, laying circular logic traps to deflect critics entirely. Kendi also dismissed criticism of him laying off people, having produced no substantial research, for $55 million, while getting people upset and confused by the ridiculous books he wrote, like Anti-Racist Baby, that tried to help literal babies understand words like equity and access. He did this by saying, again, quoting the Daily Beast article, that he was devastated both by having to conduct layoffs and by disgruntled people who are sort of using the moment to express problems, and allegations that are baseless, unfounded. Kendi's ideas may very well be proven correct and ahead of their time, but to protect them from rigorous inquiry is to miss the opportunity to address any contradictions, offer clarifications, and persuade skeptics. To be fair, I once again need to do Wahid's homework for him and cite some authors who are critical of people like me attempting to strike a balance between radicalism and practicality to round out my analysis. In Can the Subaltern Speak, Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering that, expounds on the limits of Western critique by stating about historians. The historian, transforming insurgency into text for knowledge, is only one receiver of any collectively intended social act. With no possibility of nostalgia for that lost origin, the historian must suspend, as far as possible, the clamor of his or her own consciousness, or consciousness effect as operated by disciplinary training, so that the elaboration of the insurgency, packaged with an insurgent consciousness, does not freeze into an object of investigation, or worse yet, a model for imitation. The subject implied by the texts of insurgency can only serve as a counter possibility for the narrative sanctions granted to the colonial subject in the dominant groups. The post-colonial intellectuals learned then that their privilege is their loss. In this they are a paradigm of the intellectuals. I think this means that recording a perspective on history is never entirely neutral. True from Herodotus on down. Oh no. Am I gonna have to do what I think I have to? Geronimo! Well. Oh, okay, right. Midair. Got it. That was easy. I really thought I would have to dive into the water or something, but... Oh man, this diving feels so cool. Here we go indeed! I think it also means that no intellectual can entirely escape their own cultural biases. To which I agree. Unconscious bias is always going to be a thing. And it takes work to self-critique, without hating yourself as well. I know this firsthand. And that analyzing any revolutionary movement without emotionally considering the subject's viewpoints risks stripping their humanity. I think there are limits to the very premise of History Flight's productions. Trying to summarize large portions of human history in an accessible fashion for our distracted age with background video game footage to draw out the point, even for several hours, risks flattening any subjects. As Spivak says, again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, to investigate, identify, and measure the specific nature and degree of deviation of the elements from the ideal and situated historically. Still, I try not to talk about history just as a collection of fun facts, or as polemic content against one man. For the ever-hungry algorithm that rewards the snap impressions and bare-knuckle identity politics that Wahid engages in, but to tie my personal experiences to the extent possible while still protecting my identity, which Wahid criminally violated, similar to Varang cutting enemy Kuru to my subjects' viewpoints. I do this not to deflect or claim perfect innocence, but to show I'm attempting to understand the emotional perspective of others. Meanwhile, on page 18 of Homi K. Bahabas, oh gosh, I really hope I'm not mispronouncing his name, and his book, The Location of Culture, he analyzes the place of art to frame history by saying, if we are seeking a worlding of literature, then perhaps it lies in a critical act that attempts to grasp the sleight of hand with which literature conjures with historical specificity, using the medium of psychic uncertainty, aesthetic distancing, or the obscure signs of the spirit world, the sublime and the subliminal. This resonates with me a lot because I have to do some abstraction. I have to take some creative liberties when drawing from cultures for the world of Taragia, as did James Cameron for Avatar. I drew from the First and Second French Empires to build the foundation of the Metropolitan Empire, which is the main setting of the book, to cheat a little by having the other cultures come to it for a World's Fair style thing, where people respect their inventions and cultures and food and fashion and all of that a lot better than in real life. While drawing from East African and Igbo cultures for Baharia and Mifamwanga, which is a united kingdom with a rotating Malaysian-style monarchy, as well as the Kingdom of Gersam, which draws a lot from Mali while having merfolk be people arriving on the shores of there and being accepted by the oasis people of the Assami oases throughout both the Assami savannas and the Condemned Desert, which ring very similarly to me, to my experiences visiting Eswatini and South Africa. So I will be sure, though I will not be consulting only with her to educate myself, to run this by my fiancé to make sure that I'm not tripping over unconscious biases. That's what having multiple perspectives and doing your research enables you to do. I also want to make sure that the world of Taragia is open to all. So after the Wind Empress in their Majesty's service, I will open up the world building and offered to co-author with other authors from the cultures that I'm drawing from, in order to make sure that I'm not the only one profiting off of this. Like how Avatar: The Last Airbender, unfortunately, despite its good intentions from both its white creators, benefited only Nickelodeon, while blocking people of color from telling their own stories that are too similar to that, via the idiosyncrasies of the copyright system. As literary creatures and political animals, Bahaba continues, we ought to concern ourselves with the understanding of human action, the location of culture, and the social world as a moment when something is beyond control, but it is not beyond accommodation. Babha concludes, this act of writing the world, of taking the measure of its dwelling, is magically caught in Morrison's description of her house of fiction, art as the fully realized presence of a haunting of history. Read as an image that describes the relation of art to social reality, my translation of Morrison's phrase becomes a statement on the political responsibility of the critic. For the critic must attempt to fully realize and take responsibility for the unspoken, unrepresented pasts that haunt the historical present. He means Toni Morrison's Beloved, which I need to read along with watching The Battle of Algiers and Shaft very soon. According to Time, this book is often banned in schools because of knee-jerk reactions to depictions of pedophilia, incest, and rape. This conflates analyzing a thing with endorsing it, just as Wahid has done about my positions many times, though that's obviously not the same. Or the generic general lady from the RDA did to Quaritch when she dismissed his hard work, cementing an alliance with the Ash people by criticizing his lack of uniform. I can only hope that by making these comparisons I am satisfying Babha's desire to make the ghosts of history accessible through art, but I'm open to constructive criticism of my arguments and not my person. While I provided a rigorous analysis of policy and backed my claims of harassment with documented evidence, Azal's response fails the most basic tests of intellectual and moral accountability. Azal's response, by replacing debate with sexualized insults and doxing, Azal is not decolonizing anything. He is acting out the reactionary psychoses Fanon identified in those who have internalized the master's cruelty. Cannot oppose the RDA's unilateralism in Avatar, while simply using more fire, turning the fertile ground of debate into the barren ash of personal attacks. Disagree, yes, but try to see each other. That is why I would be Sarentu if I was a Na'vi. I am a storyteller at heart, and this has been my calling in life since I wrote my first story about an owl when I was 5 years old, and felt in that moment as if I was an owl, because being a human felt awful. I have never truly been understood by many people, so I've always tried to understand other people, and have often made unintentional mistakes while doing so. Even months after Wahid made threats to, quote, skullfuck and, quote, scalp his Baha'i opponents, cloaked behind mafioso language that he still hasn't addressed either, I still tried to be friends with him. I should have just gone through the history of his past abuses and realized it was a mistake to ever associate with him, but I somehow thought he'd grown past all that. As Dale Husband put it in a YouTube comment, Wahid Azal is a master of manipulation, the hallmark of a cult leader. His claim that I was racist, a pedophile, and even suicidal, which I hope you better not fucking use, the fact that I admitted to passive ideation against me, you jerk, is much like what he did to you, and for the same reason. I refused to be his blind, deaf, and dumb follower. This easily describes Varang, or many sky people politicians. Does the ancient song of liberation that knows no skin color, no race, no geography, that can work universally in the service of human rights despite your past dismissal of any universality in human experience, demand you silence those who hold you to account? If you carry this flame of anti-colonialism, let it be a light that clarifies, not fire that consumes. Perhaps it's time you, Wahid Azal, take a lesson from Dr. Martin Luther King. True pacifism or nonviolent resistance, King wrote, is a courageous confrontation of evil by the power of love. And contrary to Fanon, and as unaddressed by you, nonviolence has liberated countries before, such as in the case of the towering figure King admired and drew from in his own leadership of much of the American civil rights movement. Mahatma Gandhi, who may have weirdly slept naked next to his grandnieces to test his ability to resist sexual desire, but left an undeniable legacy of nonviolent protest that led to India's independence from the British Raj in 1947, as opposed to the failed Indian rebellion of 1857 that inaugurated the Raj when the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah II, who was coerced into supporting the rebels, was deposed by the British, then wrote amazing Urdu poetry under the pen name Zafar, with lines that go so hard, like, as long as Indians have even an ounce of honesty and dignity, so long shall the sword of Hindustan flash before the throne of London. Let us learn from Pandora. Let us learn from the spirits of our ancestors, whoever they are. And let us learn from the true wisdom of those like Fanon, Kendi, King, Babha, Spivak, by realizing they are in dialogue with each other, and are not a monolith, and so we must be too. Let our song be free of abject hatred, and our fire be for healing, and our paths be guided by the firelight of truth, arrived at through comparative analysis, and then refreshed with the cool water of agreeing to disagree. Not the choking ash of Varang-like personal spite. As the elites pit those of us who have experience with marginality, whether through disability and gender identity, or ethnicity and religion, against each other to keep us and our great mother weak. We must open our eyes and see that effective resistance is built on truth, on justice, on historical accuracy, on respect, on nonviolence, until absolutely necessary. It also depends on the tireless, on the beautiful, on the messy work of building a new way that is just as complicated, flawed, and human as the world of the Avatar movies. Not recreating the old oppressor that just so happens to be brown, or blue like Neytiri's face, or red and gray like Varang's, rather than white. Oel Ngati Kame, I see you. Hello and welcome to SunnyRedemption Sailing, your bi-weekly voyage for BS-free gaming news. Kev, how are you?
I'm doing great, despite work being a mess. As soon as I got back from Florida. Kind of expected it though. I won't get into it too much. I don't want to bore.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah, I've just been recording my review of Avatar Fire and Ash for about an hour and a half, as well as impressions of post-colonial criticism and the limitations of Western critique, and personal harassment against me, but I'll get to all those. Well, onwards to SunnyRedemption Sailing Season 3, A Voyage of Epic Takes is what I'm going to call it, because now I think I've finally solved our technical issues and growing pains. And Avatar 3, Fire and Ash, I saw it a couple days ago at my local Alamo, stuffed myself with loaded fries, orange gochujang, and BBQ Reaper chicken wings, carnivore pizza, and truffle popcorn. I didn't eat all of these things at once, but it's like, I got to try a little bit of each, and was still stuffed, and had an old-fashioned, so that was cool. Food's kind of expensive there, and for some reason, the new all-in season pass didn't actually apply my code, despite the server saying it would, but I don't blame him. It's a new system, and I think they're still figuring it out, but I've also heard people complain a lot about the app and about the mobile ordering system. I wish that they were part of the same stack, but anyway, more to the point, the 3D was okay. It's not in the big show, so I need to go see this again, potentially with my friends from Silver Spring.
Did you see it in IMAX, by the way?
No, it was just 3D digital,
okay.
So I really need to see it in IMAX 3D
yeah,
to get
IMAX
the best 3D experience. Was like, but Alamo is convenient. It's a 20-minute walk from my house, but since it was so late at night, I lifted both ways, and it wasn't that bad. Still, I thought that it was the best Avatar movie I've seen yet.
I'm not totally sure that's the case for me, but it's like I said when I saw it, it was fantastic. I mean, it's pretty much what I was expecting, because, you know, the Part 2 Way of Water, which came out 3 years ago, and this were pretty much filmed back to back and kind of meant as one big film in a way, and that's definitely true. Like, when I saw Way of Water, I was very impressed by it because it was a huge step up from the first Avatar in just visuals and storytelling, and this isn't really a step up from that. It's just kind of more of the same, but I'm very happy with that. Like, Way of Water really blew me away, and this Fire and Ash it stayed at the same bar of quality in pretty much every way. The only thing is, like, it being the second part of a story of, you know, whatever larger Avatar story James Cameron wants to tell before he dies. It being the second part of that did sort of, like, a lot of the action scenes, while cool, especially because, you know, I went in IMAX 3D, which is how you kind of have to see those movies, honestly. I'm not usually a snob about that, but, like, it's like, hey, watch it how you want, but it took some convincing, but my friends were very happy that I was adamant about the 3D IMAX aspect, because they wanted to just go to a normal 2D showing. Way of Water was just a huge step up, because the first Avatar I saw in theaters and was pretty ambivalent about it. I was like, oh, well, the visuals were really cool, but I didn't care to ever watch it again. I was like, and then they went 13 years without making a movie, and I, you know, kind of just erased it from my memory. And then when Way of Water was coming out, I rewatched the first Avatar before Way of Water just because it had been so long, and I still felt like, this is visually cool. The visuals aged very well in the interim, but the story was not amazing. And then Way of Water, when that came out, that was what I was most impressed by. But, like, I think it's just like a part 2 of Way of Water, which makes it, in my mind, pretty much on the same level.
Yeah, I criticized it for that because I was expecting more fire and ash from a movie titled Fire and Ash, but when Varang was on screen, everything popped.
Exactly. Like, I think the sparing use of Varang and that stuff kind of, like, I think it, like, heightened the mystique of having sort of this different flavor of Na'vi on screen, I guess.
A little bit, but I also think that her motivations were underexplored.
Like, yeah, I guess, like, I wouldn't have wanted it to be like the Varang show, you know?
No, definitely not, but it also did feel like Avatar 2.5 at times. There's still a lot of great scenes in the water areas, and they did have a lot of plot threads to wrap up, but I feel like I could have done with a little bit less of some of the characters. Just a little bit more, not asking for a lot, just a little bit more of the Ashen Lands would have been nice. And a little bit more motivation for the Manquan.
Yeah, the actual, like, volcanic, you know, Ashenland stuff definitely felt the least utilized, but again, I didn't necessarily need the whole thing to take place around there. Like, they give you enough place setting to understand, like,
that's true.
The basic what's going on with these people and what they're all about.
That's what Avatar does well, is give you enough to go off of. But Cameron really has struggles with both thematic and character depth. I think that was the best of the series so far, especially with Kiri, but yeah.
I don't know about the character, like, I feel like there's a lot of implied stuff there that, you know, I think, like, it's okay to not spell everything out and just let the audience fill in the blanks of it.
It's more just that it's conveyed through unbelievably clunky dialogue and behavior a lot of the time. Like, why go back to the Mechaina village again? You know? A lot of stuff is under-logicked that way. But a lot of these things were tiny, understandable flaws. That, they bothered me, but, like, a lot of the flaws of the Avatar universe bother me, and I still enjoy those films. They're very enjoyable because of the singular world-building vision that makes a lot of the isolated plot inconsistencies make some sort of sense if you just buy into James Cameron's vision. And he does have a vision. I think it's an uncompromising vision a lot of the time that can be incredibly brutal and jerkish to actors, but nobody who has worked with him has ever said, like, oh, this guy was just irredeemably horrible. It's just like, yeah, he's a tough director, but you do it for the art. And he really did put art on screen this time. Obviously, with such a short time frame between 2 and 3, it wasn't as much of a technological leap, but it's still really impressed. And I definitely want to see it in IMAX 3D. The main theme for me, plot-wise, of the movie was Varang and Kiri. Those really were the key ingredients. Because, like, the final battle was basically a mashup of 1 and 2. Until the end, when the Manquan come in riding, like, the Rohan horse riders.
The Riders of Rohan,
The Riders of Rohan.
I thought you were talking about the Avatar ones. Like,
yes, but my point is that it's a very similar thematic structure to that battle. where, you know, you think it's going one way and then suddenly reinforcements flat in from the other side. And I really thought that Quaritch and Varang's chemistry was incredibly believable, unlike Jake and neytiri,
Oh yeah, like,
who are just staying together for the kids at this point.
Yeah, I think
and now they have one more.
Scene,
Why?
yeah, I was gonna say regarding like Quaritch and Varang, like I think my favorite scene in the movie was probably the tent scene between them. Like,
definitely.
It was a very long, like, scene that gave it some room to breathe. It was incredibly acted, and it was just like it was a perfect meshing of those two characters and seeing how they could improbably actually work together.
Yeah, actually feel like equals. I feel that same chemistry with me and Bubbo, though obviously a lot healthier than that. To your point about implied, the little that they did imply was very interesting. Like, all the skulls implies that because there's no room for plant life for the most part, though it does strike me as slightly odd that it takes this long for the land to recover, because normally volcanic eruptions actually contribute fertility to the land. But, you know, go with it. It's sci-fi. And there's a lot more volcanoes on Pandora due to the magnetic pole of Polyphemus, the gas giant, and the sun. It's implied that they have to scavenge from all sorts of animals in order to survive, which makes perfect sense when there's nothing else around. And it also makes perfect sense why she would feel abandoned by Eywa and decide to go against everything the Na'vi stood for, which that was sorely needed. I think this was definitely in the plan all along, and people just needed to be a little bit patient, but also a lot of the stuff was kind of clunky and obvious on purpose to get people into it at first for an entire worldwide audience, which does flatten the art and does bring up the question of how far are you willing to go for an evil patron. Political violence, I argued in that essay, must all turn to fire and ash. It is an objection to the idea that political violence is a necessary tool of liberation all the time. Now, there are authors who disagree with me because I can't escape my cultural framework as a Westerner and that kind of thing, but they actually have good points. What happened that I also had to address in part 1 of this video is the unjustified personal harassment by a cultist and a sociopath and a liar and a lazy old man named Wahid Azal, who decided that when he didn't like that I criticized him for making death threats to Baha'is, which I don't like the Baha'i faith. I've mentioned that many times. I've had a complicated relationship with my Baha'i ex-wife and her mother, and that's over now. And I'm fine with it. But the thing is, these are still people. You do not kill people unless it's self-defense. That's my thinking. And justifying terrorism in revolutionary context is wrong. I'm sorry. These are civilians just trying to live their lives. You cannot just justify whatever you want. You have to consider the consequences of your actions. And what he decided to do in response was reveal my real name, which could have put me at risk of being fired, because I used this channel, History Flights Productions, and my pseudonym, DC Shepard, to fearlessly criticize this government for illegal attempts to terminate us and discrimination. He just decided, fuck you, the price of disagreeing with me is your personal safety. He has still not addressed that and thinks that I am just dismissing his arguments out of hand. You, sir, are the one that's dismissing your arguments out of hand. Because when you resort to personal invective, you lose. Now, I did at one point too, but I actually had evidence that he was a sociopath. He's been threatening people online longer than I've been alive. This guy is a fucking lolcow. And yes, I know what you probably will say. You know, just ignore it. But I cannot ignore injustice. Nor can I ignore that he committed a crime and is trying to get away with it. Because it is a crime under United States law to intimidate people online for the purpose of emotional distress. It is also a crime to do so to federal employees. And it is a civil tort of invasion of privacy. So, I'm exploring all my options. I'm hoping that platform processes like on Substack will help, but that they've been very slow, and it seems like they only respond quickly to paid creators on Substack. To undermine your own arguments, that's the main thing, is that just because I'm a Westerner, just because I'm white, just because I'm American, does not make everything that I say automatically wrong because you disagree with it. And you have to cite your sources. He pointed to Fanon a lot, to Franz Fanon, the philosopher of revolution, who I'm just starting to understand, but he never points to specific quotes. So that's a huge problem for his argument as well. And in any event, Hannah Arendt said that violence probably leads to a more violent world, and that's about it. Yeah, there have been violent revolutions that liberated people, but they also put sometimes millions of civilians in jeopardy. And there have been non-violent revolutions that have led to liberation, such as in India with Mahatma Gandhi, who inspired Dr. Martin Luther King. So non-violence can work, and violence should only be used as a last resort. The Tree of Liberty may need to be refreshed from time to time by the blood of tyrants, as Thomas Jefferson once said, but that time is not yet. Democracy still has a chance, and so that's what I addressed, was the value of peace, the value of the community connections of the mycelium, Eywa, which makes perfect sense and explains everything to me without needing to refer to a deity. Because basically all the characters have been on shrooms trips, in my opinion. Cameron, of course, leaves it up to interpretation to bring it to the widest audience possible. They have the science nerds there to give the science side, and then they have the clerics there to give the cleric side as straw people, but that is valuable in broadening discourse. However, again, it can flatten your message. I mean, really what I'd want to really go into depth is an Avatar TV show, but that would be expensive. At this point, by the time he gets to Avatar 5, I will be 39 years old. So I'm really hoping that there's a satisfying resolution, though again, he has said that he'll do a press conference if he can't make it himself for some reason. As kind of a threat, I suppose, to tank all the remaining value of the Avatar franchise should they not let him print all the money for them. Which, at this point, 20th Century Fox just trusts James Cameron instincts. So even though it's a little slower than Way of Water in terms of box office, because there's not that pent-up demand, I still feel like it'll do pretty decently.
I mean, it seems like it's maintaining its momentum. I don't pay that much attention to box office stuff, but I have, like, at least seen a few headlines. Like, oh, it's, you know, broken, like, a third-week record. It's holding way better than the last two movies on its third week, so
we shall
I think
see
it's
that,
got that going for it. I don't know.
It's possible word of mouth helps.
Yeah, I saw a headline just saying that the other day. Like, oh, it's trending better than Way of Water, I guess, is the way that I think it was phrased. Way of Water had a larger drop-off between the first couple weeks.
The main thing for me is that it is very difficult for any movie to make $1 billion these days because people are pulling back spending in general. I think Marvel is hoping for this with Avengers Doomsday, but it feels like a Batman v Superman situation.
Oh my God, yeah.
Where they're just throwing all the characters at the wall and hoping that attracts them enough of an audience. It's like, okay, I can kind of get it because now there's this guy, but really what they should have done, as much as I did like the way the Galactus story was told, is they should have just introduced Dr. Doom in Fantastic Four to actually build that anticipation and hype. Now it just feels like...
Did they not? I thought that was a post-credits.
Well, that was a post-credits, though.
Yeah.
That's not really much of anything. And
yeah, it wasn't like in the proper movie. Yeah,
and because they didn't want to pay Robert Downey Jr. all the money, they just had a back of head shot, which felt very transparent. So there's just not going to be enough breathing room unless you make the movie like 4 hours long. And make it like Doomsday Part 1 and 2 or something like that.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go see it just out of curiosity. I'm sure a lot of other people are, but man, the vibes on that movie feel so bad. Like you should have heard the basically combination of sighing and laughter in my theater when the Chris Evans teaser played before Avatar.
Captain America.
Like, yeah,
oh God.
Because I didn't know that was coming out. I haven't been paying any attention to Marvel, and I was just like, oh God, are they really just that desperate that they're bringing back Chris Evans again?
Yeah,
That's just what it feels like to me.
This is the problem with expecting franchises to make billion-dollar movies forever. Eventually, no matter what you do, people get tired of these things.
I was in a full theater in Avatar, so I got to see everyone, like, there's just, like, some people going, really? Come on? Like, verbally saying, like, come on, and sighing and laughing. That was pretty much the entire reaction from the theater. So it's like, this, you know, they have a real uphill battle here. And I don't have much personal investment because I'm not, like, the biggest Marvel movie fan, but it'll be interesting to see what they do with it.
I told you, I think, that I went on my 16th birthday in a limousine to a sushi restaurant and then saw Iron Man, and my mind was blown. And I was hooked for the next 10 years. Varying degrees, because I was very much a power scaler when I was a kid. Like, oh, everything has to make sense in the powers, and Infinity War just kind of nerfing characters at random and making Thanos unstoppable, like, without a hint that he's gonna lose, was frustrating to me at the time, but then Endgame resolved that mostly, though in retrospect, it has a lot of problems. I mean, a lot of that movie's reception was driven by just the 10-year build-up. But then it felt like an ending and people left. And then
like,
they got
I
confused and overstuffed.
Like, oh, yeah, I liked where they left things off at Endgame, especially the Chris Evans stuff. I was like, oh, that's a good ending for this character's arc. And then
Disney
just having to pull the ripcord and undo that.
Yeah, like, why? People got an idea that it felt like a satisfying emotional closure. That is some of the problem with comics media in general, is because these characters go on forever, you have to keep reinventing them.
Comics have to have ongoing continuity, and they're doing that with the movies, too.
But movies are a different beast, for sure.
I understand that they're, you know, they have, you know, Anthony Mackie in the Captain America role, and maybe that's not working out the way they were hoping, but I don't know.
Cough, racism, cough.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, I didn't...
Well, also, Brave New World was bad.
So I don't...
Like,
yeah,
I think
exactly.
people would have seen a good Captain America movie.
I think there's more than just the racist angle to it. Like, I like Anthony Mackie a lot.
It just has to be mentioned, too.
Okay, well, if Anthony Mackie isn't working out, find something else. Like, that's what comics do. I understand comics will go back to the well, too, but movies, you can't really do that as well. It's like, well, Chris Evans is not 2009 Chris Evans anymore.
No, definitely not.
You know,
he started multiple romantic comedies since then.
Yeah, like,
that have been
I don't
okay,
think
by the way.
people want to see 45-year-old Captain America as much as, you know, they did back then. I feel like if they need to recast and find a new angle, they should find a new angle, not...
Well, I think that they're planning on doing a total reboot after Secret Wars resets the whole universe, except for a handful of the most popular characters, like Spider-Man with Tom Holland. He's printing money still,
and
so he'll survive somehow.
I feel like, yeah, Tom Holland, even if he can still play young, like, dude's approaching 30, so...
What? Really?
It's like,
oh, man.
Yeah, I think he's like 28 or something, so
now,
it's like...
Now I feel
you know,
unaccomplished in my life.
Yeah, whatever the next Spider-Man movie is after this next one, like, are they really going to... Like, they're going to have to, at some point, either have him be a late 20s, early 30s Spider-Man, or, you know, start over again.
Yeah, because, like, that has worked before with college angles. That would actually take, like, courageous writing a little bit, instead of just, let's throw all the Spider-Man together! Yay! Jangling keys! I liked No Way Home when I saw it.
I liked the novelty aspect of it, but I was fully aware of what I was seeing was basically just, you know, nostalgia baiting on screen for 2 hours. That's fine. That's okay once in a while. And I was okay with that. I don't need to have Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 4, Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man 3. Like, that was enough. You don't have to go back to the well again.
So it's like, oh my god, I'm so exhausted. No. And then my social battery's gone. I got struck by lightning. What a way to end the premiere of Season 3 of SunnyRedemption Sailing, your bi-weekly voyage for BS3 Gaming News. See you in 2 weeks for, see you in 2 weeks for the Developer Direct, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right. See ya.
Their curiosity is so charming.